Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Steven, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, and it's so awesome to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So we are worlds apart, aren't we?
We're on almost opposite sides of the planet. Yeah, I'm in Cambodia, so you're there in New York, so
Yeah.
just about 11 time zones away.
Only. Isn't it amazing what the internet and technology can do for us? I mean,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, just imagine. Yeah.
We couldn't do this 20 years ago. And if we did, it would be very difficult. We'd have to have a whole crew.
Oh, yeah.
helping us accomplish this, right?
For sure. I was part of like some of I was in India for some time way back, like in the mid 90s. And when we did like video conferencing, I remember we had to like go to the Department of Telecommunications. And yeah, it was a whole big endeavor to do that. Now, like anybody can just pick up their phone and do it. So, yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing the things that we can do now. And sometimes, it's really interesting when we don't realize the beauty of all that's around us and the fact that we take it for granted sometimes, right? We do take it for granted. So you do something really, really interesting, and I definitely want to talk about that. But you have totally transformed your life. And from what I gather is you were teaching music or you were doing music in New York. But even before we get into that, talk to me a little bit about your childhood. How was it growing up? Who influenced you? What were the role models that you would say that maybe you didn't see them then as role models, but now when you look back, they're like, that person made an impact in my life. Who would you say?
Right. So I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey, just outside New York City, about 12 miles from New York. And I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. Those were the times. And so if I think back to role models, well, of course, for me at least, my folks were both really powerful role models. My dad was and still is a lawyer, still practicing at age 82. And my mom was an event planner, very successful. And so I watched both of them in their work. And dad just has this incredible ability to help people and to be there and to support others. So I saw that in him, into Rotary and always doing something good for the community. So he was a real role model for me that way. Funny, creative. Mom is definitely an entrepreneur and super administrative and organized. So from her, I watched how she would put together these jobs and weddings and things like that, to the point where she was doing weddings for the rich and famous by the time she retired, doing weddings for like billionaires, and they would fly her all over the world to do them. So from like a work point of view, and of course ethical point, the point of ethics, both of them are solid people inside and out. So I was fortunate that way. But I would say my first real role model outside of my family was when I was going to summer camp and up in the Catskills, and I had a counselor who was Puerto Rican descent, and he was aspiring to join the Seminole Indian tribe at that time. So this was like in the mid 70s. I was probably about 9 years old, I would guess I'm around 9.
Mm.
And, when you go to summer camp, everybody is there to play ball, play baseball and archery and basketball and volleyball and soccer and all these kind of things.
Right, right.
And this guy had all these books on like traditional Native American spirits, these big, like coffee table sized books with these colorful pictures.
Mm.
And he would go and he would meditate. And this was at a time before, like, meditation was really
And
popular. You
yeah,
didn't have
right.
yoga centers. And he used to wake up early in the morning. I used to go spy on him. Like, what is this guy? I used to think he'd like levitate or something. And I hide in the bushes and like watch when he went outside to this like area where he would. And so I was so touched and moved by this whole idea of energies and um, the idea of being connected a little more deeply. And so while
Mm.
other kids were out doing the sporting stuff, like that was one of the things that really got me charged. So I would say he was like one of my first major influences at that time, and maybe got me onto that path of self-reflection and looking deeper into life.
Well, well. So that was in summer camp, huh?
That was in summer camp. His name was Angel Marcano. So it's funny. His name is Angel. So he was like it, and I say to me like my angel that way to open up a whole different perspective of life to me. So I was really fortunate to have that at an early age.
Mm. And then when did you get into music? At what point, or who influenced you to even find music?
For me, music was always part of my life. In fact, my earliest memory was a musical memory, and it was one listening to a choir.
Mm.
That was the first thing that I actually like, one of my first recollections, and I recall getting chills down my spine listening to the harmonies. So it started from there, and I always, my dad taught me piano, but I would always play by ear. It came to me naturally. So like I got to the point where my brother and I used to take piano lessons, and I didn't bother reading. And so sometimes I would sit there and the teacher would play something and he'd be pointing to the sheet music and I'd be looking at the sheet music, but I wouldn't be reading it. I would just be playing like what I heard, and I would just
Right.
be caught. That eventually like caught up with me. But yeah, from there it went from piano to saxophone to guitar and keyboards and bass. I eventually played drums. So
Oh,
for me, I never considered myself like a specific instrumentalist, but I mean, I guess I could say that I'm a musician, or maybe better to say that, well, I talk about tigers, right? So I have a big musical tiger that needs to be fed, and I still feed it every day, even though I don't earn money from it. I have a small keyboard here on my desk connected to some software so I can compose, and
mm,
I love to write music, and just for myself.
right.
I make my own music and I listen to it. So sometimes I share it with friends.
That's pretty cool. One of the things that which was surprising, and it's still, I mean, it's fascinating when I see even an orchestra and everybody's reading the music and they're playing at the same time. I'm like, how are they doing all this? It's so talented. And then
Right.
I found out that some drummers don't even read music.
Hmm.
They know the songs, they've created the songs, and it's just in their head. Is that what would you
Yeah.
say?
So any kind of theory,
Mm,
is a tool to get to that deeper connection. That's how I've understood it, right? So if you take especially from the Eastern perspective, I've spent the majority of my adult life living abroad in the East for most of that time. I'm in Cambodia now. I was in India before that, in Japan for 3 years also. And one of the things that I found living in the East is that many people know from either like Buddhist or Taoist teachings that everything is connected and everything is sort of connected to everything else. And one of the greatest realizations you can have is when you understand how all of these things are not individual things, right? But
mhm,
everything's on a continuum. So this is, I guess you could say, a fundamental premise or understanding of this way. And and so for me, um, when I'm in a soup and I'm not understanding a situation, it helps to have a tool. It helps to have a theory. It helps, right, in order to be able to understand certain things, to get a grip on it and get certain things steadied. And when you've understood that, you can then let it go. So for
mm,
music, it's like, yes, you can study theory and all of those things, but at a certain point, you go beyond it. and you then let it go. But it's not necessary to have that theory. Sometimes some people will come to those realizations of music or ways of life or any other things like business. Many of the people who succeeded in business didn't get an MBA. They intuitively understood what entrepreneurship is about, and they just found their route there directly, and they didn't need all that MBA stuff.
Yeah.
They got to the same point.
Yeah. So, when I was reading your bio, it was pretty interesting. You were doing music, and then in order to make ends meet, you started teaching. And one of the things that I read was was it on your first day that you said, wait a minute, I know how to do this. I know how
Yeah.
to I have a knack for this.
Yeah.
What was that like? And was it a feeling that came over you? Was it like you just taught something to someone? You're like, wait a minute, this is super easy.
I'm getting chills just sort of recollecting, remembering that moment. So I was 22, and I was from an aspiring rock star. Was living in New York in Tribeca, and I had to pay the bill, so I got this job randomly. I got this job teaching, and so I went into that class not knowing anything. My entire teacher training consisted of the owner of the school, it's a private school, putting the book in my hand and like pointing me to the door. And she said, because I told her I'm worried, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. She said, "Don't worry, you know more than they do." And she kind of like, launched me into the classroom. That was my entire teacher training. I got in there and I'm like, oh, what do I do? Where do I start? I'm like shuffling my papers, trying to like look like I know what I'm doing, whatever. And like suddenly everybody looked up, the time, started on the hour, and I just went for it, and it just started to come out of me. I knew what to do. I knew what to say. I knew which questions to ask. I knew when to ask additional questions or to turn it over to somebody else and to make a joke at the right time that everybody would get. And I would say it was about a half hour into the class, and it was like, oh my God, this is what I was meant to do. And, if I were to dramatize it, it's like the voice from the sky that says, "Steve, you're not a rock star, you're a teacher." And there really was that moment. I mean, like, even if it didn't come that way, but the realization is beyond words, right? It's
Yeah.
beyond words. It's just like whether you say, it's like one of those life flashing, those instances where your life flashes in front of you. So it was something like that. And it just became really clear that, oh my God, this is what I'm meant to do. And I remember two things that I said to myself in that by the time the class ended. One was like, this is all I need to get high. That was like the first thing. And then the second thing I said to myself was, I could do this for the rest of my life. And I have. So I'm 55 now. So you can imagine that was some 33 years ago.
Wow. That's so cool. What was that subject that you were pushed into teaching?
I was teaching ESL. It was like English to speakers of other languages, people who showed up in America and didn't know the language and just wanted to be able to talk. But I just sort of like it clicked with me. And when I talk about tigers, that's what that's about. Like, why did I know how to teach without ever having to? And why did I enjoy it? But other people wouldn't necessarily like do that or be able to do that or to find that same amount of joy. And so for me, that has a lot to do with your nature, with the genetics that you're built with, as well as some early life experiences that build into that. And it's sort of like you are pre-wired to be able to do that. And for some people, as I said, it's an entrepreneurial tiger that they know how to do that even without having done it before. And for other people, it's administration. Like my mom, she just does it naturally. My mom, like, not only takes care of all of her stuff, she knows like everybody else's to-dos, like, growing up in the house. And she'd be like, even when I go back to visit, it's like, didn't you say 2 days ago that you had that letter you had to send to the lawyer, blah, 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 whatever. Did you send that yet?
Wow.
Sometimes I forget. I'm like, how does she remember that? Like that even slipped by me. So
That's pretty cool.
So that's just something that comes pre-wired.
Yeah.
And her mom is like that, or was like that,
Wow.
my grandmother. So that's where she got it from.
Oh, that's cool. By the way, I put your website up, feedyourtigers.com, and
Yeah.
we're going to talk definitely a lot more about that, and we're going to get deep into it. So you were pushed into this position in a way, right? Because I mean, you needed money, you needed to
Yeah.
live, right? But someone saw something in you that you maybe didn't even see in yourself, right?
No, no, not at all. I'll tell you what happened when I originally went for the job,
Mm,
right? So I went there and the woman interviewed me and she said, listen, and I had a resume that was probably about that long because I was just out of school. She says to me, look, she called me up after the interview and she said, you know, you're a really nice young man, but you don't have enough experience, and we've hired somebody with more experience than you. So I'm sorry, we can't give you the job. So I got a call from her like 3 weeks later, and she's like, the guy who we hired instead of you just suddenly quit. Would you be
mhm.
able to fill in? I was like, yeah. Like when? She's like, how about in an hour? I'm like, okay. I was playing my guitar. I really. And so I put my guitar down, run downstairs. I jump on the #1 train, get uptown to where the school was. I run upstairs, and like there she was waiting for me. So it wasn't necessarily that she had seen that in me, but afterwards she was happy that she made the choice because I really did give it my all, and the students loved me, and I got results with them.
Yeah, well, you stepped into the role, right? But she did see something in you because I'm sure she probably interviewed other people who maybe were not. It's really interesting when someone, when we have choices to make, right? And the choices that we do make sometimes don't always pan out. And then we have to kind of like look back and say, what would be my next best choice? And so
Mhm.
you were her next best choice. And, like you said, she was happy she did, and it worked out. And the fact that you were there in an hour kind of helped too, right?
Absolutely.
Opportunity presents itself, and sometimes we're not present for it, right? Or we
Yes.
don't see it. Um, because if you said, you know what, today's no good, I'll come in next week, she might have said, you know what, I need somebody now. And so she might have called the next person, right? So
Sure.
absolutely, absolutely. When we have an opportunity that truly presents itself. So
Yeah.
go ahead, go for it.
Yes. What I'll say is that if you're present in the moment, every situation is going to that you encounter it will present itself to you. Now the question is, what do you do and how do you act or interact with that?
Right.
And for me, when I'm in touch more with my innate potential, when I'm in touch with these qualities, like if I know that my entertaining tiger or my educative tiger is a big one, and I'm in touch with that, and then that opportunity presents itself, then I am aware of that
Mm,
because I'm in tune with, that's consider it like vibrations, or frequencies matching each other. So there's this opportunity for something which is educative and where, okay, you have to entertain also as a teacher. So that's like sort of going by when I'm in tune with my educative, my entertaining, and they're both near each other, then you are aware of that. But if I'm thinking that, no, I've got to be, an accountant, or I want to do something in the field of design, and that's not really who I am. So I'm sort of like, the frequency is really distorted
mm,
and it's not resonant. Or I'll recognize that, no, my frequency is here. That thing is operating at a different frequency.
mm,
And not everybody makes that decision correctly because what they often choose to view is, oh, if I do that, I could make a lot of money doing that,
mm,
or, I could be famous doing that, or that would look really good in the eyes of others, even though it's not who you are.
right.
And so what they're resonating with is their false sense of what that particular job or situation is about. And then when they get in, they find out, hey, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And then,
Oh, yeah. I love the fact that you talked about, you know, resonating and energy and even focus. So many people don't pay attention to the energies that are around them, right? The frequency, the vibration, because we all operate at a certain frequency. There's a vibration that we all are dealing with. Some of us don't recognize that someone's vibration could be like low, or high or medium, but also we may come in with a super high energy and they have a low energy, and so there's no mix there. There's no harmony. So and I love the fact that you talked about that. How do you, even as a teacher, how do you harmonize, if you will,
Yeah.
with a student, someone that you're trying to teach something to?
Yeah, so the first thing is, okay, it's kind of like when you go on the airplane and they say that in case there's a sudden drop in cabin pressure, oxygen mask will deploy from above. If you're with, children or the elderly, please put yours on first before you help others.
Mm,
Okay, so the first thing that I say is that you've got to be in touch with your own innate potential, with your own abilities, before you're actually going to be able to effectively see it in others. That's really important. So start with you, get connected to those tigers, get connected to where your strengths are, where your natural proclivities are. And once you do that, when you look at others, you will be able to sense it in them more. And in this case, well, it depends what it is that you're doing. I know that you in your audience that you interact with are coaches of all different types,
right.
right? And so the first thing that I would say is, what kind of coach are you, and
Mm,
how do you bring your tigers to the table as a coach? Like, for some people, I mean, in most cases, all coaches would need to have a big educative tiger. That's sort of like, if you don't have that, you're just not going anywhere. So that's like the first thing.
right.
And beyond that, the second thing that people are going to need, to be an effective coach, is a big interpersonal tiger. You're going to be interacting with people a lot and all the time. So you'd better love to be with people a lot. And
Mhm,
now, beyond that, then it starts to get like more like, nuanced. If you have a big bodily tiger that you're great with athletics, so that's going to incline you more toward like fitness instruction.
mhm,
Or if you're, let's say, healing tiger is a big one, right? So you could be coaching people around, dealing with traumas and how to overcome those particular traumas in their lives. If it's something related to, let's just say, entrepreneurship, so that's a big tiger for you, you might wind up coaching people for business.
mhm,
And then there's any combinations of these, but what I want to demonstrate, what's unique or interesting about the model or the approach that I'm taking, is that there's no one way, and you can remix it depending upon the situation. Where you do need to be careful, though, is where you have smaller tigers. That's a place where you need to watch out, because let's just say, like, if your logical is not necessarily a big one, like working with numbers and math and stuff
mm,
like that, um, that means that you might have difficulty when it comes to dealing with finance or maintaining spreadsheets or dealing with cash flow, because those things will escape you, and it becomes a little bit, or you might not be, even though you might be entrepreneurial, you might not be the best person to be coaching other people with a smaller logical tiger, because there's going to be a fundamental gap missing for what you need to be bringing to other people in that area. Look at somebody like, who's the guy who did Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Kiyosaki,
Okay, right.
Robert Kiyosaki.
Right. So, he's somebody, a big entrepreneurial tiger, big logical tiger as well, big educative tiger.
Mhm,
So he's very effective with his and entertaining. So he's
right,
got good examples. He can explain it numerically. He can explain it entrepreneurially, and he can explain it well. So
right,
that's why somebody like him is really good, good at something like that. You would take a look at someone like Tony Robbins, right? And while he talks about that, his intrapersonal is much bigger, and his healing is also much bigger. Like, he's
mm,
talking about helping people to overcome
right,
bottlenecks and blockages that are holding them back. So you can see why certain people gravitate toward different types of coaching, and then what would make them better and more effective when they put those together. And there are unlimited ways that you can mix these things up. So
mhm,
that's like the first part of the answer to that. I say, is that when you're working with students, first you have to know what your tigers are and how you can best combine them together to be able to figure out who are the students or who are the clients that you could most effectively serve.
mm.
Then, depending upon what it is that you're working with, okay, so if you were guiding somebody and someone came to you for business coaching advice and you recognized in them that their entrepreneurial tiger is a small one, or it's not really that big, and they're saying, I want to go out, I want to start my own, you might say to them, hey, wait a minute. Do you really think it's a great idea when your natural ability in entrepreneurship is not necessarily your biggest asset? There are
Right.
other ways that you can succeed and be happy.
Right.
And in some cases, like when I've met people like this, I've suggested that find someone like somebody, for example, it winds up like this. They are their bodily tiger is a big one.
Mm.
Their healing tiger is a big one. And they're really good at something and healing. They're really good at something like massage therapy.
Right.
They know how to sense the pain in somebody. They know how to get right to it and to put the right amount of pressure, put that person at ease, and that person just feels so relieved. But then that person wants to open up a chain of spas. And this actually happened. Somebody once called me years back, and it was a woman from France. I don't know where she got my number. And she's like, I want to open up a chain of spas called Easy Spa, and blah, blah, blah. She was going on about this. We both determined that her entrepreneurial, because I said, if it comes to the entrepreneurial part, get ready that you're going to be marketing and
Mm.
you're going to have to get out there and, you know, get a lot of customers in and follow up with them. And do you really want to be doing that? You know, setting up standards and processes for, you're going to have to get investment because you're probably not going to be able to do that all on your own. And then she's like, that's what it's about. Oh, okay. And we ended the call. So if you have a student that you're coaching and they come to you, rather than just saying, okay, you're not that naturally talented in entrepreneurship. Okay, you're missing something. Let's add it. Take
Yeah.
this course and you got to work hard and you got to be
Mm.
passionate and you got to want it and you have to like make sacrifices elsewhere. So you're setting that person up for failure
Oh, yeah.
because they don't have the natural underlying qualities to be able to succeed easily at that. And I would never want to say to somebody, you can't or you are limited. But
Right.
what I do want to say is that any endeavor that you set out on is going to require certain abilities and certain natural abilities. And if you've got bigger tigers in those areas, well, it just makes it easier and it takes less energy to move in that direction and to get return on the investment that you make. So we
Mm.
all have limited time, we all have limited energy, we all have limited resources. And if you're a single mom, taking care of two kids, and you're working a full-time job and a part-time job, and then you have this idea to open up Easy Spa and then someone's saying, quit those two jobs and just go for it. And that person doesn't have that entrepreneurial or the administrative. You're not doing them a favor. You're actually doing them a disservice. So, I mean,
Mm.
this is one example, but you could take so many other examples from this. So my goal here, or my suggestion here, is with students, with people who come to you, know what it is that they're looking to achieve, help them also figure out where their natural abilities are, and get them to put their biggest tigers in the areas that will give them the greatest return on investment, and then to get support where those tigers aren't naturally as big.
Mm. Mm. You know, and that's why, and exactly what you said, is why so many people start a business 6 months, a year later, close it. Because, first of all, they didn't do their due diligence, which you talked about, right? Put the oxygen mask on yourself first. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What can you handle? What don't you know? And in order for certain businesses to be successful, you may have to rely on other people. And if you don't have reliable people, even though you have to rely on them, but if they're not reliable, wow,
Oh,
that's another
absolutely.
huge, uptick in that failure. So don't chew more than don't
I definitely think
more
it's
than
you.
you need, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about, you know, the kind of tiger that we are, you have an assessment, right? Before we even get to your assessment, you found, what is it, a $5,000 secret in India? What
5,000
made
a
it
year.
5,000? Oh,
I would call it priceless, but the
500?
literature, yeah, the literature that I studied while I was in India, it comes from the Vedas. which are thousands of years old. I mean, there's nobody really knows they have thoughts, but we know that India is one of the oldest living civilizations. So there's a lot of literature that's in Sanskrit, and I
Mm,
had a very good friend who was a Sanskrit scholar, PhD in
mm.
Sanskrit, and spoke perfect English and knew that language incredibly deeply. So he was able to help me unlock much of the details that were in there, and that was related to psychology, philosophy, various things in literature about the science of life, the science of knowledge itself. So there was so much that I was able to unpack from that, and from that knowledge, I was able to derive this idea of the tigers, and then bring it into a more of a modern context and throw in some technology to make it accessible to people. So I feel like that's kind of what I did over the 21 years that I was there. It took me a while.
You were in India for 21 years.
Yeah, that was a long time. It took me
So,
it took me actually it took me the first 5 years to break my Western frame, to stop looking at India from a Western perspective.
mhm.
And then, like, I was just looking at things as they were, and then it took me another 5 years, I would say, to develop more of an Eastern perspective, to understand how to view life and the various experiences that I was going through from more of an Eastern perspective. And I would say it took like another decade for me to bridge both of those and to combine them together. So it was no longer an East or West, but a holistic approach,
Mm.
holistic view.
Wow. Wow.
So it took a while.
Yeah. So, and the fact that you understood that it did take a while, right? And you can come back and have the perspective to that. What what took you to India?
So when I was teaching in that school and I had that epiphany, my idea was like, I got a little indignant because when I discovered that, oh my God, I have this thing for teaching. It's like,
Right.
this is what I meant to do. Then I got indignant because I'm like, how come nobody ever told me this, right? How come I never knew this? How is it possible that I went through all those years of schooling and through college, but I never knew this about myself? Like this is a crime.
Mm,
And so then I sort of like vowed, like you're 22,
right,
you want to change the world, right? So you have all these ideas. So I said to myself, okay, I'm gonna make a school, and in my school, all kids are gonna know who they are, and that's what's gonna be the center of the curriculum.
mm,
And so I set out to make a school like that in New York. And a friend of mine was in India, and he's like, "Dude, why don't you come here and open up that school here?" And I'm like, "Whoa, that would be cool." And so I took a visit. I went for a visit, and then it took about 3 years for me to fully launch that. I went to Japan for 3 years before.
mm,
I continued to teach. I saved up as much money as I could, and I got a master's in education. Temple University has a campus there in Tokyo, so I did a master's in education there. So I got money behind me. I got some credentials and some experience in teaching, and then I went for it when I was about just about 26. I moved to India.
So you actually opened up a school, huh?
And I opened up the school. So on the first day, we didn't have enough money with my friends who were there to open up, like buy a piece of land and or get a building or build a building. So we opened the school in our house on the first day with like there were 8 kids and 3 teachers, and it was kindergarten to third. Maybe like just 2 or so kids per class.
Right, right.
And each year, that we continued, we would add on another grade. So the students who were in third went to fourth, and then the next year went from fourth to we opened up a fifth, and
Right.
it continued until it went up to 12th. And so eventually it was nursery through 12th. And today that school's got about 2,000 kids in it, nursery through 12th. So,
Wow. Not in
so
the house.
no, not in the house. That was, I forget what year, maybe it was around just before 2000. Maybe 99, 2000, we moved out of the house. We got a piece of land finally.
Mm.
And it was 100 and I remember there were 175 kids in the house at that time, and they were everywhere. They were in like we maximized the space of the house in the basement, and on the roof we put some kind of like a bamboo, because we couldn't build, like there was a limit to how
Right.
high we could build. So we put sort of like this bamboo roof.
Yeah.
And so there was kids studying there. And I knew it was time. I knew it was time for us to get out of there when I thought it was Sunday morning, but it was actually a Monday morning. And my room was there, and the bathroom was like outside of my room. It wasn't like inside of
Right.
my room. and I was in my towel, and the classroom was just outside my bedroom, and I sort of bleary-eyed, I sort of like put my towel on, and I step outside and that's all, I had nothing on from the top up. I step outside, and suddenly I hear a chorus of "Sir G, good morning," maybe about 15 kids, and I said to them, "Good morning." They were about, like, I don't know, 5 years old. "Good morning," and I sort of like went back into sheepishly back into my room, said, "Okay, we have to change some things around here."
Right.
So that was also beautiful, being in that experience and just being immersed by that. I mean, just imagine my educative tiger. I was like swimming in it.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, it was like pure pleasure. But then, of course, I needed to draw some boundaries, and
Yes.
got the land and got the kids out, and then school started growing. And yeah,
Wow.
and true to the original mission, the center of the curriculum was and still is about each child knowing who they are. And so
Wow.
there's far less emphasis put on getting high marks and whatnot. Although, there is a pursuit of academic excellence, but it's not like that's the only thing. Um, we did over the years find some students who were not academically inclined, but were incredible in art and creativity, or in healing, or in
Mm.
being adventurous. So there were many other areas that we looked to help guide those children. So by the time they graduated, they knew where they were going, whether they were going to college or not, and if so, which kind of program, and then where it was going to lead to after that.
Mm.
So, for me, that was the most important thing that was my original aim, and it wound up being like that. So I feel like something was accomplished.
I think we need that kind of schooling here in the United States, actually all over the world, if you will, because so many people don't get the education they truly need because no one knows who they are, right? They're just thrown into the mix, and it's like you have to learn this, but you can't learn it because you're not capable, or that's not where you're supposed to be. And I
Yeah.
love that concept of, maybe they were not good at math, but they were good at, music, right?
Mhm.
So, or the arts, or they were gifted in somewhere else, but we're going to put them down because, hey, your math stinks, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, yeah, the education system is very much set up for certain tigers. In
mm,
other words, if you're linguistic and your logical tigers are big ones, and
mm,
your administrative is a big one, well, it's a cakewalk.
yep,
When we went through school, the kids who were naturally organized
mm,
and naturally talented in language and logic, they they would make a little bit of an effort, and they would get huge results back, and they would get all the praise, and it would be like, rinse repeat. They would go through this virtuous cycle,
mm,
and they went, straight into really good colleges, and into, high paying jobs eventually, etc. But if you had tigers that weren't necessarily strong in those areas, yeah, you sort of fell through the cracks. And like, giving the examples that you were pointing out, we had one student who had this amazing ability for cooking.
mm.
And after he left, and he had really average scores. After he left, he went to culinary school, and he became like this rock star chef, working in 5 stars, and then cooking for, like, by the time he was in his early 20s, he had cooked for all these, like, movie stars and for, like, heads of state, and he set up his own company eventually after that. So, um, that's what happens. That's what happens when you get aligned. But there is one thing I wanna go back and touch on. Like you said, of course, being superlative, like, nobody knows who they are. What what we were talking about before, you were saying the example that you gave was about, there are some people who are, like, let's say, musicians, but they don't even know how to read music.
Right.
Um, some people even say that about Pavarotti. They wonder, like, he never said it, but there were some people who said that he didn't know actually how to read it, or to read much of it. Um Jimi Hendrix admitted that he couldn't read music,
Mm,
but yet they broke through, and they wound up getting to that end of being able to be an artist and express themselves fully
right.
through music, through instruments. So it's not necessary for everybody to have to go through the steps of schooling, training, theory, etc., in order to get there. But that's typically a very small percentage of the people, and typically their tigers in that particular area are massive.
Mm.
So they figure it out quickly because those tigers are primed for it, and they just know how to pull the principles out. You'll hear Elon Musk all the time talking about it's about first principles. It's about first principles. So he looks at situations and he boils it down to the essence and he gets to it right away, and then he knows how to nail the problem. Well, you can do that when you've got a natural proclivity towards that, and so what I want to say is that. Um, it's the people who do figure it out, and there are lots of people who do crack it. I would say it's maybe like about 10%
Mhm.
in their fields, they figure it out, and that's due to the fact that, and it could be healers, right? It could be somebody who's got this incredibly, prodigious healing tiger. They just understand how to sense people's pain and to get them out of it, and they find their ways. They find their way there, and they become a sensation, whether or not they do well in school. So
Mm.
that's the prerequisite.
Yeah, yeah. So would you say that our tigers are we're born with them, or is it tigers that we can evolve into?
Yeah, so this is the nature versus nurture question.
Mm.
My research and understanding and experience shows me that it's part of both. I can't tell you whether it's, and there's people who will say, it's 50-50, it's like
Right.
25-75. Some people will say it's like one or the other. Um, but my experience is that it's both of them. We are
Mhm.
born with natural tendencies to be driven or to be pulled towards certain types of activities that's there. And based on the experiences that we're exposed to, the situations, the people, circumstances, those qualities will have an opportunity to manifest more. So, for instance, if you have a parent that's naturally gifted in music, so you're
Mhm.
going to have some musical genes in there.
Right.
And if you grow up listening to, their music is part of the everyday activities, the parents are playing music, you're exposed to hearing it, going to concerts, given music lessons, etc. So that tiger is going to, if you're encouraged to do it, that tiger is going to naturally grow exponentially. I
Mhm.
can see it like in my daughter. So like in my case, my entertaining is a little bit on the bigger side. I know lots of people who are far more entertaining than I am, but I look at others and I say, okay, I know that I'm more entertaining than they are. So I was always in acting. I was always doing things like that growing up.
Mhm.
And I see my daughter, she's 2 years old now, and I also see her, she knows that she's funny. She knows how to be funny.
Right.
Things that she says, the way that she says it. And recently what I discovered, 2 years old,
Mm.
she's got comedic timing. Like
Really?
she knows when to say, and I'll ask her a question like, "Are you gonna put that stuffed animal over there?" And she'll go, "No." "Well, what about that one?" No. So it's like when she says it, like I
Mhm.
can actually feel that she's got the and she's caught that. She watches YouTube videos, she watches, TikTok from time to time, she'll flip through it. So from her experiences of being around me, where I have some sort of sense of timing like that, from seeing it from other people, she has naturally what is it, metabolized that and come to, if you want to call those first principles, or come to the skill of being able to do those things. And so
Mm.
for her, it's going to be that, but it's not going to be some others. For other children, it's going to be other qualities, whether those be, a visual type, like, drawing, coloring, painting, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty incredible. Um, what are your thoughts on prodigies?
Mm. So my thought about prodigies is, it's sensitive in the sense that I'm always concerned about the child and the child's well-being
Mhm.
and the child's being able to live. When I don't say like live a normal life, but live a happy life, live a content life. um in some cases there's undue pressure that's put on them,
Right,
or when they demonstrate immense talent in a particular area, sometimes they are either paraded or parents try to cash in on it and
right.
to, bring them to a certain, and in the process, they can suffer socially and they can suffer in other areas of their lives. And I have somebody who I know who has a child that is just remarkable with mathematics. I mean, who was doing like algebraic equations when he was 4, just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
By age 4, also he had memorized by himself the periodic table with all of the atomic weights to 4 decimal points, like
Mm.
that kind of prodigious. And he was really challenged for many years socially, being excluded, being isolated. And my friend my friend also had to back down quite a bit, not to put that sort of to set up those goals for him and allow him to just be a child. I think something also that happens with prodigies of any type, even if it's a musical, like I was talking about Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
Um, one of the challenges that I've seen them face is that when things come very easily to somebody, or I would say easily than the rest of the population. They are at, in terms of there's so many standard deviations away from the norm. So they just touch a musical instrument and play one note and everybody's in awe.
Yeah.
So what happens to them is that there can be a lack of motivation, because everything comes so easy. So there's almost no incentive to work hard, because if they just do something easily, they get the reward really quickly. Well, what we know about motivation and reward is we need to have a challenge in front of us. When we've got a challenge that's just the right challenge, it's a little bit beyond our ability, but not too
Mm.
far. Right. And so when you've got a challenge like that, then you work toward it. And when you get it, it's like, yeah, we've experienced this when we either in sports or in video games, when it's too hard, so hard that we can't achieve it. And we try again and again and again, and we keep failing. We get frustrated and then we drop it.
Right.
But the opposite is also there. If everything that you do just comes so easily, you lack that motivation. You don't get the dopamine hit. You don't get a reward. And so when that's happening, it throws out really confusing signals. And there's, I would say, a temptation to seek out pleasure from other sources, which is often why you see people who are super talented turn to drugs
Mm.
or other means of stimulation, because they're just not getting that joyous feeling of reward from the thing that they're actually so good at. And that's hard for most people to understand, because when we're not good at it, we struggle. So it's painful for us and we don't get the compliments. We have to keep working at it. They have the exact opposite. It can be traumatic, and it can be a curse in a way, for everything to come so easily.
Yeah, and then they probably feel isolated too, right? If you will.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk about your assessment. I know that
Mhm.
on your website you have an assessment that people can take. You told me that we can do it kind of live here, right? I'd love to jump on it and give it a shot. And I know we're not going to do the whole thing, but I want you to explain what would happen when somebody goes to your website, how it works, and everything
Sure.
else.
Sure. So we have a test. It's called the MN test, the multiple natures test. And there are 19, I call them tigers, or
Mm.
your talents or potential or abilities. And what the test does, it takes about 20 minutes, and it will help you understand that which of these is big or medium or small. You do it on a 10-point scale.
Right.
And when you do that, then afterwards, you'll be able to figure out what types of work or side gigs or leisure activities would be best for you to engage in order for you to feed all your tigers. And so there are matching reports that also go with it. And we've got, as of date, we have about 120 people who have been trained in administering the test, and also in providing interpretation. So usually when people come, they've got a question that they're asking themselves: should I open this business or not?
Mm.
Or I'm not feeling like, there's something that's eating away at me from inside. I feel like I have unfulfilled potential. Like, what do I do about that? Or I'm burnt out and I need to do a reset. Or I'm in job transition right now and I want to get out of this job and into another one, but where should I go? I mean, I've even had people who are in their retired years. They finish working and then they're like, okay, what am I going to do
Uh-huh. Yeah.
for in my golden years? Like, I don't know. Okay, maybe I can do volunteer work, but then what? Am I going to be a crossing guard, or am I going to help, do a Big Brothers or Big Sisters program, or am I going to, what is it going to be? So this tool will be able provides information for you to give you some of those insights as to how you could solve that problem. So that's what it's about. It comes with graphs, and there are deeper descriptions of each of the tigers and what they do, and
Mm.
so on.
Interesting that, you're right. When we are supposed to have our golden years, right? And so many seniors are not. Look at how many people, they retire and they die 6 months later, because
Yeah,
it's almost like their purpose is done. They're
sure.
done. They didn't plan. You hear a lot of people, yeah, I'm retiring next year. I'm retiring next year. What are you going to do after you retire? Are you going to sit home and watch TV? Are you going to do things? Are you actually going to live those golden years?
Yeah.
And a lot of people who do retire, you know what they wind up doing? They become babysitters for their grandchildren instead of enjoying. So a lot of times, oh, mom, dad, I got to go to work. Can you take care of the kids? Yeah, and it's one day, and all of a sudden it's 3 days. All of a sudden it's every day of the week, and they have no life left. Now they're just caretakers again, instead of living their golden years. So I like the idea of someone coming to your website, or even to you personally, and figuring out, I'm going to retire next year. What should I plan on doing? How should I plan my golden years?
Yeah.
What are my steps? What should I facilitate so that I
Mhm.
can make it happen, right?
Yeah.
So how important is that, would you say?
Well, I say it's essential. And there's a really good example of a woman that I worked with. She was a criminal psychologist, and she never wanted to go into criminal psychology. Her father was in that field,
Mm,
and really, I say, influenced her. She says forced her into that. She couldn't say no to him, and he eventually passed away, and she retired. She stopped that in her early 60s, and I interacted with her, and she's like, "I don't know what to do." And when we went through the assessment, we found that her educative tiger was huge, and her linguistic tiger was also huge. So for her, she wound up teaching English, or being an English tutor, so helping children and tutoring them from low income areas. So
mhm,
that was a way that she could really feel fully engaged. And there's something I want to point out here about this word retirement, because I think people not just misunderstand it, but I would like to extend or expand the meaning of it, or give a different way to look at it. So, the idea of, like, when you retire, is that, okay, I stop working and maybe doing stuff that, like, maybe I don't want to do, so I can do things I can enjoy.
right.
Right. There's this belief that when I retire, then I'll travel, I'll be able to take dance lessons, I'll paint, I'll be able to do the stuff I always wanted to do.
Mm,
So what does that mean, doing the stuff that you want to do? What it means is feeding tigers. So if you have a big creative tiger and a linguistic tiger, then you might love to write. Now, I know a guy who is quote unquote retired, and he does script writing, and he does novel writing too. So he's writing, in fact, 2 novels,
mm,
and at the same time, and a script. So he's feeding his tigers all the time by doing that. And to me, what's interesting is that if you were to consider the term retirement, meaning to be able to have enough, or to be able to have the resources to do what you want, so you can feed the tigers that you want, well,
right.
it doesn't have to be when you're 60 or when you're 70.
Exactly.
If you get it right earlier on, like if you're in your 20s now, um, and you figure out which are the tigers that you want to feed, you can actually line it up now. So you're feeding most of your tigers, or the big ones, in the main work that you do,
Mm,
as well as in maybe some gigs, or in your hobbies. And so you could technically be retired in that sense, even though you might not have, like, the financial resources to be able to stop working. But you might be in a position where you love your job because it's feeding your big tigers, and you've got a little Etsy thing going on the side, and you play some music, with your kids for fun, or take care of your grandkids. It could also be that. Like if your providing tiger is big, you might love to do that. So, but the choice is yours, and
Right.
and that is possible. That is possible to have that earlier, but you need to be intentional about that. You need to know your tigers, and
Mm.
then you need to have a strategy how you're going to feed them.
Right. So your test is 19, right? 19 tigers.
Yeah, there are 19 that I've identified.
Would you mind going through it?
Sure, I I could do all of them. So there are two sets of tigers, and this is also really interesting. It's like a left eye and a right eye. So
Mm.
one set of tigers is a set that I created out of my research from India, and another is a set that was proposed by Howard Gardner, who is a professor of cognitive psychology at Harvard. And
Mm.
he proposed Gardner's idea, and this really is what got me started in the first place. Um, in 1983, he came out with a book called Frames of Mind, and he challenged this idea of IQ, saying it's not how smart you are, but it's how you are smart. There are many ways to be smart, what he called multiple intelligencies, not just like intelligence. And so there he talked about bodily intelligence, so being smart with your body, interpersonal, so being smart with people, logical, being smart with numbers,
Mm.
linguistic, with words and language, visual, so being smart with any kind of visual things that you see, coloring, drawing, painting, and the spatial things as well. Uh, musical,
Mm.
intrapersonal, so that would be like self-reflection and thinking about thoughts and the meaning of life. And then the last is naturalistic, so being connected to being smart with plants, animals, nature, the environment. So he viewed all of these as kind of like channels through which your energy flows, and you're going to flow more toward the bigger ones. So we all have all of them,
Right.
but then again to different degrees. So that was the first one. But what troubled me was that it didn't say how or why you
Mm.
should channel energy through there. So I asked myself these questions. Why am I into this educational thing? Like, I don't see anything in here that says anything about teaching. Or why is somebody very funny? Or
Mm.
why does somebody like to take risks and, jump out of airplanes? So I
Right.
couldn't find that in that. And so in my research with the Indian literature, I then derived these tigers, which are different than the intelligencies. They're multiple natures. They're
Mhm.
tendencies, ways that you tend to act, which have a social purpose. So, for instance, there's a protective tiger. So that's a tendency to prevent harm, loss, injury, wrongdoing. So
Right.
you would know, like it's a big one for you if you're the one who's saying, "Hey, don't throw that on the floor, pick it up," or put your seatbelt on, all right, or follow the rules,
Mm.
or you point out mistakes in grammar and stuff like that. So that's a protective nature.
Mhm.
There is an educative nature, which we've talked about, an educative tiger, so loves to teach. Administrative, getting the work done. Creative, which is coming up with new ideas. Some people have huge tigers that are creative. The next is a healing tiger, so helping the tiger that loves to identify pain and imbalance in others and get them out of it. An entertaining tiger, which loves to attract attention and to amuse people. There's providing, the one that loves to give, help, serve, and to take care of. It's an empathy of need that you can sense other people's needs and want to fulfill them.
Mhm.
Entrepreneurial. And then the last one is adventurous. So that's all of and taking risks, right? So those are all of them. And again, for me, the cool thing, so you can do this little experiment, even if you're listening right now. I ask people to do this. Think about like your left eye and your right eye.
Mhm.
So like if you close or you put your hand over like, one of your eyes and you keep it closed and keep it fully closed so there's no light that's going in and you look around for a period of
Yeah.
time. Do it right now. Yeah. So so what do you notice while you've got one eye closed? What's happening? Like how does it feel? What are you sensing and
I'm gonna tell
experiencing?
you what's going on with me. I'm odd. One eye is nearsighted
Mhm.
and the other one is farsighted.
Okay. So
So that's why I'm
keep
odd.
that hand covered like that. Keep it there for a period of time because it's the duration that's important.
Oh,
But
okay.
like what are you experiencing right now?
Blurriness,
Okay.
right? So everything's unless it's really close to me.
Okay.
Like if I put my hand here, I can see it really clear.
Okay.
I can see
All
all
right.
the tiny little lines.
Okay.
But
But
here,
you probably feel like something's incomplete.
correct.
You might feel limited. You
Mhm.
might feel like, that you're uncomfortable. So I'll count to 3, and when I say 3, take your hand off and just see what happens when you take your hand off. Are you ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Clarity.
Whoa, right? Everything just opens up. It's like I see the full picture. So for me, these intelligences and natures, and this is the interesting thing about this model, is it's not just one set of qualities, because one set of qualities is like, looking at things with one eye,
Mm,
monocular vision. It's two-dimensional.
right.
In this model, I'm using 2 different sets that interact with each other, which gives you this three-dimensional understanding of a person. So now just see how it works, right? Your protective nature, this protective tiger, you want to prevent harm, loss,
Mm,
injury, wrongdoing, injustice, right? The protective tiger wants to eat. Now imagine that your bodily intelligence, right? Your bodily tiger is a big one. So protective plus the bodily, what does that lead you toward in terms of a career? Want to protect with the body. Want to
You,
protect with the body.
yeah, you want to help people, right? You want to maybe doctor, nurse, um,
Can be. I mean, but
football
things like a police officer,
right? Fireman,
military,
right?
bodyguard, right?
Yep.
So that's the protecting with the body, protecting with the body. It can also be some of these things too. They will be there in nurses and also with doctors. Now let's move it down a bit. Let's just say you want to protect, but your body is not like your big tiger, but your language and your logic are big tigers. So it's like protect with language and logic, protect with language and logic.
Educator, right?
Can
Educator.
be, yeah, but a lawyer,
Yeah.
right? A human rights activist.
Mhm.
So they don't need to like rough people up or to,
Right.
give them an uppercut. Here, they use language and logic to protect.
Mm,
And you can keep mixing these things up in this three-dimensional way. So like you
mm,
could take that bodily and then mix it, as we said, with educative, could be a fitness trainer. You could
right.
have bodily plus healing. That brings you like Reiki or a physiotherapist or massage therapist. If it's the language plus healing, well, then that could be a psychologist so can you see how this like
Oh, yeah.
all the fireworks start going?
That's pretty.
That's
I love it. It's so cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's what goes on. So what I love to do is help people figure out which are the big tigers and then how to mix it up.
Yeah.
How to mix it up, how to feed all those tigers and like find different ways to combine them.
Mm.
Then it becomes cool. You get to like keep remixing your life, not just, like you get to do like a cool remix.
I like what you just talked about, the remixing your life, because we all, whether you like it or not, unless you're in a cell your whole life, we go through transformations, right? We go from when we're a toddler to, you know, 10 years old, then we go to teen years, then we go through a young adulthood, then we go through adulthood, and then we go in even in stages in life of in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s. And for those of us who are going to live to be over 100, me being one of them, we go through so many stages in life. And I'm thinking that the stages in life derive from two things, right? Your capacity to improve and learn, and your understanding of those two things. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I like your question a lot. For me, it's your understanding of your ability. So you're saying that this second one that you said, that's something that happens over time. We tend to understand ourselves better as we get older. So that's one thing. And on the other side, what I want to say is that um, when we go through these different phases or stages, life, the circumstances of life change.
Mhm.
So it's our ability to be able to look at what our natural abilities are and to adapt and to adjust to them for each of these changing scenarios. So we start off and we're students, and from there we're then working, and then perhaps we have families, and then
Mm.
we're looking to gain some stability. And then at certain points, some people might pass away, or, we get, as I mentioned, we get married along the way. And
Mhm.
so there are so many of these we have to move there's a pandemic that happens. So life is constantly happening to us, and our ability to understand and then to be able to adapt these natural abilities to the best of the opportunities that are in front of me right now, that seems to me to be like the balance between these. Our capacity to improve does depend on this, but I also really want to point out one thing. Our capacity to improve is largely dependent on the size of the tiger,
Mm.
the natural size of the tiger. So if I've got a tremendous educative nature, let's just say, so it's a big one. So
Right.
that means that I learn quickly. If I go into a class and it's a new sort of, idea, new sort of class that I'm starting to teach, I'll learn really fast. And in just like one or two classes, I'll be able to have a professional level course that will work and will deliver results.
Mm.
Somebody else whose educative tiger is not as big, they might need to run that course for a year before it gets to a level that they say, okay, now this is really working and I've gotten a lot of feedback. And for me, it's, my logical is not nearly as big. So if I've got to do something with mathematics, with finance, et cetera, so I'll put in all this time, and even I've learned a lot over the years. Even I've made attempts at it. Even I've done courses, but still, it's like I still have to put in a lot of effort to get back a little bit of results. So I
Mm.
think that that's important for people to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Effort is there, but
Mhm.
don't underestimate the power of the natural talent and the size of the tigers.
Mm. Yeah, I got to tell you, I am enjoying this conversation so much. You have such a depth, a insight, and it was all just because you decided to look deeper, right? And so many people don't do that. They just stay, I guess, where they think that they've been put into, right? A lot of people like that lady that you were talking about, that she felt like her dad forced her into a profession and she didn't even want to do it, and then finally you helped her find her tigers. To me, that's amazing. So you did a little assessment earlier on me, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts now that you got to know me a little bit?
So in your case, as we went through the tigers, and I asked you different questions, and I mean, usually I would have you do it through the online test, but okay, in this case, I can sort of eye it because I've done it thousands of times, so
Right.
so I get it. So in your case, what some of the big ones that we've identified, in fact, there were a lot of big ones. Your gross bodily, so your athletic ability, your dexterity, your interpersonal is also big, and that we've seen. Like, I haven't seen you doing sports, so I can't say, but I can definitely see that you're connected, that you are present, that when we're interacting, your eyes are open. So, you're curious, you're inquisitive. So all of that definitely validated. You mentioned that your logical and linguistic were about medium, um, and many of the others were big ones. And so what that means to me is when you have a lot of big tigers like this to feed, that you're going to have to find ways to feed them all. And
Mm,
it might not be possible to do it in just one, in just like a day job. You're
no.
going to need to spread it out. You're going to need to have lots of different things to do every day and across your week. Because if you start only focusing on one area, right? If you're only doing, a limited number of these things, well, what happens is that you're going to get hungry tigers,
Mm,
and big hungry tigers.
okay.
And what I say is that if you don't feed your tigers, they eat you.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I need 12 days in a 7-day week.
Get that.
So for me, it's always I feel like the more I get into things, the more I evolve. And for me, learning is, oh my gosh, It's beyond. This is why I'm addicted to my own show because I get to talk to amazing people like yourself and I learn. And you taught me so much today, but I'm constantly reading, I'm looking things up. And even one of my clients yesterday said to me, you're always doing something, you're always moving, you're always learning. What don't you know? What career haven't you had? And I even told you before, it's like my purpose is to live, and I got to live fully. So yeah, I don't know, and I don't want my tigers to eat me, right? I want to keep feeding them, but man, I have a lot of tigers, and I think that's what makes me an entrepreneur because I'm not satisfied with the status quo. There is no status quo. There's something else that I haven't done yet. I need to go do it, right?
Absolutely.
What what suggestion would you give someone like myself, an entrepreneur, someone who look, people who have it all, but still pursue more. That's the kind of people I kind of align myself with because there's still hunger in them, right? I'm a hungry tiger, if you will. So how do you, or what's your suggestion for someone even like me?
Well, if you think about just regular food and appetite. It's not like you eat one meal and then you're satisfied for
Yeah.
like, a day or a week. You're going to get hungry again, and you need to keep eating throughout your life. And the tigers are very much the same. When you wake up in the morning, you've got these tigers inside of you that need to eat. And by eat here, I mean to act. You
Mm,
look out at the world and you say, okay, who am I? And what have I got here? And what does the world need from me? What is it asking from me? In some cases, some people can self plan or determine that. They can create their own companies or make their own hours or do their own, etc. In other cases, some people don't have, like, they might lack that entrepreneurial tiger, a big one, and they don't know how to set up their own schedules, which is why they go to work for people who do. That's why
mm,
there are, people who start businesses and then people go to work for them.
right,
So, what I would say, and this is advice that I would give to anybody, which is just make sure that you keep feeding. You're gonna have to feed those tigers. It
mm,
doesn't it's not like you're making that choice. You're gonna have to feed them one way or the other, because if you don't, like I say, they're gonna eat you. What does that mean? They're gonna eat you. What it means is that you'll get frustrated. When you don't feed them, you're gonna get a sense of frustration inside. You're gonna feel like angst, anxiety. You're gonna feel antsy, like, "Ugh, there's something, like, I'm bored." You're gonna start like shaking your feet, shaking your, tapping your foot. You're gonna want to get up, and you'd be walking back and forth across your room, like, So
yeah,
if you've got, when you're in that situation, you act, what's going on at that point is that there's, in your brain, there is a lack of dopamine. So dopamine is not releasing. So dopamine is that, as I said before, that motivation and reward thing, that when you do something, you feel, you do it, you accomplish it, you feel good, and then you want to keep repeating that cycle. In that sense, like, dopamine in this case is actually the satisfaction that you get from
mm,
feeding a tiger,
right,
right? That's what chemically what's going on in the brain,
right,
right? You have a challenge, you set it up, you do it. It's like, yeah, okay, I
right,
nailed that. I did that thing. So you feel sad. But when you're not feeling that, when that dopamine's not releasing, you feel like a blockage. You feel like hungry, and then you actually turn toward other things to stimulate you in order to get the dopamine flowing. So that could be carbs, eating something, that could be sugar, it could be
mm,
chocolate, it could be like, not just a cup of coffee, but your second or third.
mm,
It could be, smoking or vaping or stimulants of various types. It could even be things like, what I call retail therapy. Go buy yourself another dash. You fill in the blank. You know what it is that when you got a weakness
right,
for, um, and or even diversion. You go and you watch some video of something that's like, entertaining. But
mm,
each of these ways of stimulating that chemical release in the brain is not ultimately sustainable in a healthy way. You can't, like, smoke your way to, like, happiness and health. You
yeah,
can't keep eating your way to happiness and health. They might give you temporary fixes, but they will compound and they will wind up bringing you physical illness as a result of that. Therefore, when you do feed things with that, you sort of set it up. Like for you, it's almost like those people in the circus when they have like the sticks with the
The plates. Yeah.
plates on top. So you've got like maybe like 15 of those that you have to keep going and keep doing. For other people, it might only be 3, 4, or 5 that they have to just go back and forth. So it might be easier for them to just feed a couple of them even in one job and maybe in a little bit of a hobby, and they wouldn't have to worry. So the advice that I would give to you is be prepared that for your whole life, you're gonna need to be, like, feeding lots of tigers, and
Mm.
therefore, um, don't neglect any, and when you're feeling some angst, and when you get the trigger, when you suddenly see yourself like reaching for that second cup of coffee or you're going for something that you don't need to eat or stimulate or buy, just use that as an example to say, whoa, which tiger is hungry right now? Like,
Yeah.
that's the connection. If you can make that, you'll
Mm.
stop and then, for me, maybe it might be something musical. Like, I haven't done something musical, let's say in 2 days, and it's like eating away at me. And I don't realize it's like frog in the,
Yeah.
the frog in the
Yeah.
pot, and I'm boiling alive and I don't even realize it. And I said, okay, you know what? You just went for another like, cup of coffee and you stop that. Okay. Do something musical right now. Take 20 minutes and
Yeah.
pull out and I'll turn on my keyboard. I'll bring my music software and I'll compose something really quick. Within 10 minutes to 50, I'm so buzzing. It's like the
Mhm.
equivalent of, a double shot of espresso. And suddenly I'm awake again. It
Yeah.
isn't People don't realize how powerful it is just to feed a tiger. And that's why I say, like, don't be lazy to feed the tigers to give yourself a boost and give yourself a charge. Of course, make it sustainable, get
Mhm.
it into your work, get it into a part-time gig,
Yeah.
get it into a hobby if you can. But yeah, so that's my advice.
That's a natural high for me, right? And for you too, right? Once
Yeah.
you're into it, it's like, wow, I feel so good.
Yeah.
And so many people are not listening to their tigers, right? And
Yep.
this is why all of my listeners, anyone who's even watching on either YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and if you're watching the replay, you got to go and reach out to Steven. Steven, you have been just a wonderful and an amazing guest, and I want to thank you for that. You've taught me that, yeah, I got to take care of my tigers, but also sometimes you need to like have a relaxing tiger too, right? You got to chill sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, you have to give them a break too. You can overfeed them. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just and the other thing when you talked about the spinning plates, I'm like, yeah, you can't spin plates for very long time. Eventually, one's gonna fall, and then maybe they all fall. So that's why you have to ask for help. You have to ask
Mm,
someone else to come in and handle those 3 over there. I'll handle these 3, you
yeah.
handle those 3. And so sometimes we forget that there are people that we can rely on that
Mm,
can help us, right?
yeah.
So we can achieve more through teamwork.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because they'll have tigers that are big ones where you don't have, and so it's a perfect opportunity, like, puzzle pieces, getting people to, I'm not necessarily someone's not so creative, but they need creative ideas. Go to somebody with a big creative tiger, get them in-source their creative capacity,
Mm,
and somebody else might be more administrative. Utilize them to help you get your act together.
right,
So that's where great teamwork happens when you leverage each other's tigers.
yeah. Stephen, wow. Thank you. Thank you. This has been
Thank
so
you
much
so much for
fun.
having me. I
Oh my
really enjoyed
goodness.
hanging with you.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And just before we go, I know that you had a shift, right, if you will, because you were gonna leave Cambodia, but the pandemic hit
Yeah.
and then you stuck it out. You're still in Cambodia. Where are you off to when you do decide to move on?
No idea right now. It could be anywhere.
Wow.
Though the given my past, if I hear a calling and it sounds right or it looks right, then I might consider that. But right now, I guess it's really who knows. I'm here, and I'm now here in Cambodia, and all is well. And so let's see where the next call comes from.
Awesome. All right, my friend. You have a blessed day.
Thank you so much. Okay.
All right. Take care.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
All right.